Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 now of the Catholit Catechesis podcast here. Coming to you live from Houston, Texas. This is sitting at home during this quarantine phase, interviewing some of my friends. Here I have two of my very good friends, fellow Fall Rome 2018 compatriots, Alex and Colette. Let me say hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. So, let's go ahead and jump right into the whole shebang. The first kind of section of the podcast is questions about your own personal experience with catechesis. So, with that being said, where did you guys get your kind of religious education when you were, um, you know, learning for the sacraments and stuff like that?
Um, you can go first, Alex, if you want.
For elementary school, I went to a Catholic school, so we had regular religion classes Monday through Friday. We went to Mass as a class, and that's where I received teaching before I received my first communion and reconciliation. And then in high school, I was part of a life teen program at my parish, and so that's where I received my confirmation and really the bulk of my formation is adult in my faith, because when I was in elementary school taking those religious or religion classes in elementary school, that wasn't quite the same, but in high school was a lot more adult-like, I guess, and it was only once a week though, which was different from elementary school.
How about you,
I
Colette?
was homeschooled all the way through high school with a Catholic curriculum. And so all my classes, I had a religion class every year. And I really liked them. They were really good. And then in high school, I also did Life Teen, which was also once a week. And that was good. It was honestly more of a social thing. We didn't actually learn that much. I didn't know if it was, yeah. Well, I jumped around different ones and um, I did learn a lot. But like most of my Catholic education came from the school I had growing up. So yeah.
Cool. So, did you have any kind of, when you went to get your sacraments, were they at your parish, like your confirmation classes and stuff?
Those I also did at home, and then I just talked to the bishop, and he like made sure that I knew enough. We had like a meeting, and then I did know enough, so I confirmed.
Thankfully, yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the style of the teaching like? Alex, maybe this is a little bit more geared towards you because you had a lot more parish kind of formation in terms of sacramental education. Did you have like more? Did you have like a box program, like the Life Teen box programs, or I think Dynamic Catholic is another big one nowadays. Or was like the teaching more self-developed? Did they let the volunteers kind of come up with their own classes and stuff?
Yeah, so what I remember the most vividly is definitely high school for my confirmation, which I received my freshman year. And although now the parish does a sort of box program, when I was in it, it was just sort of like whatever the volunteers wanted. So it was three teachers, one of them who is in charge of the young adult program, or the teen program, I guess, and then a married couple who also helped teach it. And so they would just rotate weeks being in charge of the topic. I'm guessing they had some sort of like list of topics they wanted to go through, and then they would give a talk. And then often we would do small groups or a game or something, but it was really just sort of however they wanted to do it. Now they have a box program and they have worksheets and everything, but I don't know.
Right, right.
I don't know much about that.
Colette, what about you? Did you like when your homeschool curriculum? How was that done?
Like how was it structured, you mean?
Yeah. Did y'all actually? I'm sorry. Kateri mentioned this because she was also homeschooled for like religious education. Did y'all take your curriculum from like some online, like
Yeah, we actually
learning
had the
source?
same curriculum. It's like it's positioned out of California, and it's some of the classes you can take online, although you don't have to, and some you could just have like an assisted teacher who like you have calls with every now and then and checks up on you and
Right,
grades your
right.
papers and stuff. Um, and but most of them you just had a syllabus and you just followed the things along and your mom would like check up on you, and like in high school. But before
Right.
high school, she would be our teacher, and she would like read with us and everything, and like help us with assignments.
Nice. Yeah, no, the more I talk with more people about this, I'm starting to realize that that's a lot that more prevalent than I thought it was, like homeschooled religious education. Because the few friends that I know here in Houston that were homeschooled, they actually went to parishes for their confirmation classes and stuff like that. So that's actually pretty new to me, at least in my own experience. How would you guys, do you guys think, how would you say that your religious education has shaped your view of the church?
Um, it well, I'm educated on how the church works now, so my view of the church is, I guess, just understanding what the church teaches and like just their views on things. And yeah, what do you exactly mean on like my view on the
Like
church?
in a sense,
Like how
the
I
way that you were taught, saying since you were homeschooled, has that had an effect on the way that you kind of your faith life in a sense?
Yes, because if I wasn't taught at all, I wouldn't understand it at all, and I probably wouldn't agree with anything. Um, so yeah, and
Right.
I think it was a good education.
Okay. How about you, Alex?
Wait, so are you asking about how it changed or how it affects our view of the church, as in like the Roman Catholic Church, or our faith, like our relationship with God? What specifically are you?
No, I'm talking about the church as a whole.
Okay.
Uh, I think I'm trying to see if the way that you were taught, in a sense, like if you were taught in a parish or if you were homeschooled or you got your education through a Catholic school, if that's affected the way that people kind of think of the way that the church operates.
Oh, okay. Um, yeah, I mean, it was, I think, good for us all to, because the life team that I was participated in was held at the local parish. So we were at church there. And one of our deacons was also really involved in the program. So he was able to give more, I guess, like professional like knowledge that he had from working within the church for many years. And so as a deacon, he was able to share that with us, and the priests from the parish would come and speak to us. And so that was really good for us to sort of see, because they've been very involved in the church since they were young. And so to have that opportunity to talk to them about it and them speak to us about it from their own experience was really helpful.
Nice. Okay. So how would you guys, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like I'm gonna be a saint because I was taught in this specific way, how would you rate your catechesis experience?
I
That's a hard question.
That is a hard question. I don't. Well, somewhere in the middle, I guess. I think that one of the downfalls of the program that I participated in was that it didn't teach us really to make the faith our own. It taught us the facts, like what the church teaches about this and this issue, and what like the sins are that you shouldn't commit, and like it taught us about the sacraments and what our responsibilities and obligations were as members of the Catholic Church.
Right.
But I don't think that it really taught us the important. I mean, we would have a night every year where they talked about prayer and like different ways of praying. You could do Lectio Divina, you could pray the Rosary, you could do silent prayer, kind of like telling us what they were, but it didn't really encourage us to develop our own prayer life in the way that I think it could have. And so that was a downfall, and that was something that like my faith has really benefited from me learning more about like how to pray on my own in college. And I think that was something that was missing from that high school program, just because it was really comprehensive and going over information that we should know, but less practical and like giving us the tools to really like become saints. So
Yeah, to take it like the other level.
yeah.
What about you, Colette?
I kind of had the opposite problem with when I was attending Life Teen meetings and stuff. It was only making it your own, where they weren't actually teaching the faith as much or like what the church teaches. It was more just like reading scripture and then asking us how we would interpretate it and not how the church interpretates it. But during my high school religion or my homeschool religion classes, it was more of what the church teaches. So I guess I got a little bit of both, which is kind of beneficial. On a scale of 1 to 10, I really don't know how holy I am. I can't really answer that.
No, I also feel it's a bit like worse for the people that were homeschooled, because I'm like basically telling you how well did your parents teach you. I want you to judge how good your parents are at teaching you.
I would
But
say
yeah, no,
they taught me better than Life Teen has.
than the parish program. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, Alex, I wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier. Do you think that comprehensive program? Do you think that that's a good way to go about things nowadays? Now that, because like you would ideally you would want to be able to trust people to look into things outside of life nights or education nights or whatever. But like we know that nowadays maybe that's not, you can't really say that people will look into things outside of wherever they hear things, right? Do you think that that's a good way to go forward with like teaching?
Could you explain that a little more?
Yeah. No. So since you said their program was very comprehensive in the education way, like, right, they taught you like a bunch of stuff,
Yeah.
right? But they didn't help you like make your faith, like understand why your faith was your faith.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But do you think there's a benefit to that type of program nowadays? Because I guess a lot of people don't really know what the church is all about.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I do think it was important. They definitely covered. They would have life nights, I guess, on a lot of the more controversial issues, that like misunderstandings about Mary and the saints, or about the church's stance on gay marriage or abortion or things like that are pretty controversial, and that people that might cause people to have misunderstandings about the church. So I think that was really important, and I think it's good that they did that. But although it's important to correct those prejudices that people might have about the church, just so that they'll be open to it, I think that there needs to be a second step where people really like take personal responsibility for their faith. And of course you can say like they should be responsible for doing that. I mean, like you have free will, and it's your responsibility to take charge of your faith and like pray on your own. But it's hard in high school really to just like expect kids to sit in silent prayer when they haven't been taught to or given the tools to, because I mean it's kind of difficult. And so
yeah, absolutely.
I think it's important to cover those big topics, the things that might keep people away from the church because they misunderstand its mission, but equally, if not more important, to do the other part as well.
To the personal well-being of their faith. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Very well said. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next section. This is the fun one. This is where we bring out all the hidden opinions that people have on on the church and the way that the church does things. So, hoping for a few firecrackers in there. The first question on this one is actually, I'll read you guys out some quotes from church docs over Catechesis. Now, I don't have a ton because all of my Catechesis books are still on campus. I didn't get a chance to pack up and move them out before campus closed. But I do have a couple from like online documents that I could access. These are from St. Augustine's First Catechetical Instruction. So I don't know if you guys know about this, but one of the bishops in St. Augustine's time, he was having trouble with catechesis in his own diocese. And so he, like not knowing what to do, he knew that St. Augustine was a scholar, basically a genius. And he's like, well, maybe he has something to say on the matter. So he wrote him a letter asking for his help in developing like a way of teaching the faithful. And the book is written. It's literally Saint Augustine's reply to that letter, which I find really. I really find it a fun writing style. It's a fun read. If you ever had a chance, you can go ahead and check it out. But the first quote from that document is actually one that maybe a lot of people don't agree with nowadays. It says to avoid arguing, refute refute heretics with what has been foretold. So I think nowadays people in arguments, you have that give and take, right? You're taught to listen to the person's position, try to understand it, and try to, there's a lot of that, give and take in an argument. St. Augustine would not have agreed with that. I think St. Augustine says, well, if we're teaching people the truth, then anything that they might have against it, that must be a lie. It must be a falsehood. So you don't have to entertain that. You have to reapply the teaching and try to make sure that they get it. I don't know. Do you guys agree or disagree with that?
Could you read the quote again?
Yeah. Avoid arguing. Refute those that have questions with what has been foretold. So foretold being scripture, revelation, stuff like that.
I think that I don't know how useful the word arguing is, because often what's being done isn't, you're not trying to pick a fight with someone, but that a lot of the applications of some of the rather vague quotes in the Bible are sort of difficult to navigate that, and it's not clear to us how it would be applied to some modern context that's not directly addressed in the Bible. So it's useful, I think, to have that dialogue, if not because we should compromise and settle for anything less than the truth or anything less than what those documents say, but because it is unclear, and for the purpose of teaching. If you just are talking to someone who doesn't believe or doesn't agree, and you just say well, this is what the Bible says, so there, they're not really going to be willing to listen to that. And Christ called us to be go forth and be disciples to all nations. He wants us to invite people into the church and explain it to them in a way that they can understand. And if something in the Bible seems a little off to them, it seems like the wording is really harsh or it doesn't seem to apply today, I think it's really important to have that dialogue, maybe not to argue, but to consider the way that they see it, because it's probably legitimate, and to sort of try to reconcile that with your understanding. So.
Yeah, I would
agree with that.
I would agree, and St. Thomas More talks about this a lot, how that's part of rhetoric is listening to the other person, and when your willingness to understand them, even if you totally disagree with them, just showing that you will listen to them will make them listen to you, and otherwise they'll just be totally closed-minded. So yeah, I would disagree with Augustine in that way.
Yeah, no, I agree with both of what you guys said, and it was brought up in the 2 interviews yesterday as well, that like what you said, Alex, the Bible is not necessarily a textbook that's easy to read. Take it from somebody that's been studying the Bible for 3 years through my theology classes. Some of the stuff is not easy. It is not simple, and so yes, for somebody that's coming at it from an outside point of view, these things might not make sense. So I think it's important to take that into account. Whatever they might have is a legitimate misunderstanding, which we have the responsibility to correct that. Maybe not, refute it or tell them they're wrong, but we definitely have the responsibility to tell them about the truth. All right. The next one is also from St. Augustine. He says, we learn in them what we teach, when he was referencing the catechist as himself. Actually, this is probably something I should have asked beforehand. Have you guys ever been involved in catechesis, volunteering to teach a class or anything like that?
Yeah, I kind of helped to teach a confirmation class in high school, but not very...
What's kind of mean?
I would go and help, but I wasn't really doing the bulk of the teaching. I was just helping with the I don't know, little tasks that needed to be taken care of, but I wasn't like I was standing in front of the class teaching. So
Right.
yeah. Leading smaller groups sometimes, but
I guess I taught my little siblings a little bit, or would help teach them, but not really. But yeah, definitely not the bulk of it.
So would actually, I think maybe a little explanation of the quote. I think when he says we learn in them what we teach is not saying that like we're going to learn more about what we're teaching from the students, but we're going to learn more about what we're teaching based on that, like that we're teaching somebody else. And in doing that, we have to, learn more about what we have, what we're teaching to other people. Yeah, do you guys do you disagree with that statement?
I agree with that.
yeah, I agree with that.
Agree with that?
So the quote was, "We learn in them what we teach."
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We learn
Yeah,
what
I
we
mean,
teach.
I've heard this before, like studying, that if you can explain something to someone else, that means that you really understand it, and if you can't, then there's sort of a gap there. So I think it is really helpful to have those conversations with other people, even if you're really confident in your faith, because our faith is never going to be perfect. It's never going to be 100% full, just because of like the limitations of our intellect and like the limitations on our faith. And so I think it is important to talk to people that maybe disagree with you so that you can come to understand it even better, and to find the places where there is a gap in your understanding and dive deeper into that, whether it be like in prayer or in scripture or talking to a spiritual director or something. But it is important to always sort of like keep striving at that, instead of like complacency doesn't really fit well with what we're trying to do. And so it's important to like have that dialogue with people in order to like draw ourselves out of that tendency towards complacency.
Yeah, very well said. Colette, anything else to add?
Oh no, that was really
You
good.
just agree with it?
I agree.
All right. The next one, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a rundown of the history of catechesis and how it's developed in the church. Along with St. Augustine in the early church, there's also a figure named St. Cyril of Jerusalem, and his method was based on lectures. So it was a set of 23 lectures that he would give to the groups of that were trying to be received into the church, right? But before you got into one of those lectures, you had to do 40 days of penance, full stop, no exceptions. And then each session was comprised of first an exorcism, then a reading from scripture, homily, and a prayer. So these guys were not messing around. They wanted to make sure that people that were coming into the faith wanted to come to the faith for the right reasons.
But it was first an exorcism, you said?
Yeah, an exorcism.
Okay.
Yeah, of every session. So 23 exorcisms. If you have any demons left in you after that, can't do much about it. But I think that exemplifies the early church as a whole. It's this small community, right? So you want to make sure that people that are going to enter that community want to enter it for the right reasons and are well informed about what they're doing. So they're not just, on a whim going to join this like new religious movement. Although in medieval times, the church keeps getting bigger, the church keeps growing. That it doesn't fall away. I don't think that's a good way of saying it, but it fades. Like the importance of the quality of the education, kind of is diminished in terms of in favor of like the quantity of education, because now you have all of these people that are being like that the church is responsible for. And you can't really educate each and every one of them the same way that you could have done it earlier. So now I think the emphasis was on let's get them in the church as quickly as they can. Sure they know the basics, but we want to make sure that they're in the church, right? You can see this in like the missionaries, St. Gall and St. Boniface. They were big proponents of that, making sure that people had the basics at the very least before they entered the church. And then another document called De Institutione Locali was released in, I believe, the late 16th century, and it was saying that the language is very severe. It says it's inexcusable for parents not to teach their children about the faith. Now, I think that's only written because the church, the parishes themselves, or the communities, weren't able to teach that much because of how many people there were, right? So it's like the emphasis was more on when you go in the home, there needs to be a lot of more explanation than is possible in kind of the communities that they had in those times. And now in modern times, finally, we have kind of a trying to bring those two developmental phases together in Vatican II. The biggest example that I have of this is actually the RCIA process. I don't know have you all ever, are you familiar with somebody that's gone through that process before?
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Right, Colette. So there's like a year waiting period, right, before you can even enter the program.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole like year of education before you're received into the church on the Easter Vigil. So it's trying to bring back that early quality of the education for people, but also like the world isn't getting smaller, right? The world's only keep getting bigger. So we need to have that quality in a way that we can give it to a bunch of people. Do you guys kind of sympathize more with one side, the quality or the quantity, or do you think that that's the church moving forward has to continue the way the journey that Vatican II started? This kind of synthesis of those two.
The quality being from the church and the quantity being from your family.
The quality, I'm using those two words in kind of a broad sense manner. I don't think you can really say that like they didn't care about the quality of people's education in the medieval times, but I think what was emphasized in that historical period is definitely different. In the early church, people wanted to make sure that that people that were coming into the church had a very, very firm understanding of the church and its teachings. While in medieval times, I don't think that disappeared, I think what was more important to them was to make sure that people were converted. And now in modern times, I think we're trying to bring those two together, and in my opinion, still a bit of an imperfect way, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think, I guess it is important, obviously, to have both, because having like that breadth of knowledge is really important, so that you know kind of what you're getting into and what you're committing yourself to, especially. But I think that because of the special grace that comes with being baptized, it's super important to like get people baptized, you know, because you have that grace that like you wouldn't have otherwise.
Right.
And so although it is important that people be really educated and know what the church teaches, I think if their hearts are there, that it's not quite as important. Well, I don't know.
Oh, that's a hard question.
It is a hard question.
No softballs in the Catholit podcast,
Yeah.
guys. Only independent thinking here.
Yeah. I don't know. That is hard. Colette, do you have anything?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely very important to be educated when you are joining a church. And the people I do know that went through the RCI program they say that it was a pretty bad program and they weren't educated enough, and they had to do their own research from really reliable sources, but it was not through the program at all. And they ended up, after converting, becoming RCIA teachers because they saw like such a need. And and like I agree, they would tell me stories of the things they would learn, and it was like so lame, and it was so vague, and like not even an education. And so like just knowing that, it was like, wow, it's really important to know your stuff when you're joining the church. And you have to be open to grace to receive it, and you have to like know enough to be like you have to know what grace is, at least, you know, and like
right,
you have
absolutely.
to know a lot to be able to receive grace. So
But what about like babies are baptized without knowing anything?
well, when parents baptize their kids, they're most likely, or they're supposed to at least, bring them up in the faith. So they're educating them as they grow.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And
No, I think it's like I mentioned from that church document in medieval times. I don't think the church has moved away from that. I think it's not been emphasized in the voices that the church, you know, the voices the church comes from. in a long time the role of the parents in the catechesis of their children, right? But it's not gone away. It just hasn't been talked about as much recently. Although, considering like the quality of programs in this, at least especially that I've seen in the United States, I think that definitely needs to come back up sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, Speaking of quality of programs and teachers and things like that, this is something that I've thought about a bit because my parish here in Houston, um, operates on a volunteer basis. So people that volunteer usually they'll go like through they'll attend like a seminar 1 week and then they'll be put in charge of classes. Um, I wouldn't say that my parish has the best catechesis in the diocese, but I don't think it's the worst either. Um, but I wanted to get you guys' opinion on this. Do you think the church should require its catechizers to be like professionals, not necessarily theologians with like a bachelor's or master's in theology, but just like a training program or something like that? Or do you think it should continue to encourage like parishes to look for volunteers and on that basis?
I think they should be professionals to some degree, and maybe volunteers could be there to help, but shouldn't be like the top authority.
Hmm.
Because you have to know if you're teaching the right
Hmm.
things, um, and you have to have a bit more education in that regard.
Hmm. No, to you, Alex.
Yeah, I don't know. I know it's really hard, at least at my parish at home, because I've spoken to a lot of the like core team who leads it, and
Hmm.
they're often losing members because it is a volunteer position, and a lot of the people who help with the program are college students, young adults, and they're really busy. They're in school,
Hmm.
they're trying to find new jobs. Sometimes they move, they get married, and there's so much going on in their lives that they don't stay for very long. So often they'll leave
Hmm.
and then they have to find someone new. And I know it's really a struggle for them to find people who are willing to be there.
Hmm.
And so I think it would be really hard for parishes to have everyone be like super educated. I don't know. You want people who are educated to
No,
be
it's
teaching
well
the
said,
classes,
yeah.
but you also like kind of have to make do with what you have. And also, I think that sometimes their like will, like their desire to be there, their wanting to bring other people into the faith is
Hmm.
sometimes worth more than having that breadth of knowledge. Because I know that one of the things that um, the leader of the program at my parish, like he definitely did not have a theology degree, but he did an
Hmm.
incredible job teaching. I mean, he was self-taught as we all are. I mean, you're a theology major, but Colette and I aren't. And like, I don't know, I try to read things on my own and come to understand
Yeah.
things better. And as did he, and he was very knowledgeable even without having like
Hmm.
professional like a degree or certification or anything. And the thing that made him so valuable to the program was that he really wanted to be there, and so he would really like make these valuable connections with the teens. The teens would come and he'd say like, hey, like I am so glad that you are here, like I am here for you. If you ever want to
Hmm.
talk, like reach out to me, like I'm willing to meet with you or talk on the phone. He would give us like people his phone number, like
Absolutely.
super willing to be there. And I think that was what like
Hmm.
made the teens keep coming back, because they felt like they were valued, and like it was important that they be there, like someone wanted them to be there. And I think that sometimes that can be more valuable than the person, maybe like someone who has a degree in theology, who doesn't really. I'm not saying this is tribute, but like someone who knows a lot but
Great
doesn't.
prognosis for my future.
No, I know that
No,
I'm
all
excluding
jokes,
you
all
from
jokes.
this. But it might be different from someone who like has all the information, but they're too busy and they don't really
Hmm.
want to be there, so they're not gonna take the time and the energy to like establish those personal relationships with
Hmm.
the students and make sure that they keep coming back, because that personal ministry is so important. And if you don't want to be there really, then it's difficult to like keep it going.
Yeah,
So
to reconcile that.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you definitely hit on a good point there. The wanting to be there is definitely a lot more than 50% of the issue. Um, I had my first youth minister when I was here at my parish was just like kind of the way you described it, Alex. She was her degree was in music. She was not like a theology major at her college. Like she was training to be a choir director, but she stepped up and she filled that void, and she like educated herself basically. And we all loved her for it because she, like you said, had that energy of I'm glad you're here, and thank you for being part of this community. Like I want to be a I want to be a resource for you basically. I want to be your youth minister. But also on that point, I think I've also seen the downside of that, in that when she left and we had to replace her, we also got a volunteer. But as much as probably she wanted to do the job, she was not cut out for it. Personally, like it was like her first job at the parish, and she just it's not her gig. It wasn't her gig really.
Yeah.
She was not good with kids. She was not good with like crowds. She was not good at leading in general. And that's not me trying to judge her and say bad things about her. That's just what I saw.
Yeah.
Like personally, she was like her prayer life was incredible. She volunteered at everything, so she was always willing and able to be there, and that counts for a lot, as you said.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's all. I don't think it's the whole package.
Yeah.
Patrick and Joe brought it up when they were talking to me earlier, because they volunteer at St. Luke's over by UD.
Oh. Nice.
And they told me that like the only reason they got the position was because their Opus Dei, I don't really know the term for it, but their Opus Dei leader recommended them to the parish,
Yeah.
and they like the parish was like, oh, can you help out? And they're like, okay, we'll help out. And they got in there, they had no clue what they were doing.
Yeah.
Like they had to control a group of 25 like hyperactive 15 to 16 teenage like boys, which no degree can prepare you for the energy and aloofness of teenage men. Because
Well,
they're a species apart.
yeah, it is experience. That doesn't require so much like a degree as it does experience, like years in the field. Honestly, at the beginning, no matter like how certified you are, it's always going to be difficult. And I think that that's something that just like over time, and you do have to sort of find your niche. Like I know that in our program at least, there was someone who's like very much had a knack for leading, and so he would like be up in front and like be the face of the program kind of, and like give a lot of talks and coordinate a lot. And then there was someone, but he wasn't very organized, and so someone else was really organized, and they would do a lot more of like the scheduling and sending emails out. And so they like, I think it's really important that people sort of test out all those different roles within ministry and find their niche. But if someone's really passionate and they want to be involved, I don't think that they should be barred from it just because they don't have like a professional education, but that they should just need to find like where their gifts and talents that God has given them can best be used. Because like God has given us some, like in some capacity, like we have the gift, we don't know what it is maybe, or like what, like where exactly that's going to be made use of, but like God has given us all the gifts to bring other people into the church, because that's why, like that's like a very important role for us. And so I think it's just a matter of finding that and like finding that niche. Yeah.
Right. Do y'all think that falls on the parish to kind of harness that energy and make sure it goes in the right place, in terms of like they want to do the job, but they don't really know what that job entails, so let's put them through like some sort of training program or something like that? Do you think that falls on the parish, or do you think that falls on the person?
Probably the parish.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, like the person would be a little biased towards themselves.
Yeah, I agree. And the parish is really invested in, they're an authority, and they're really invested in like making the program succeed for their parishioners, like for the kids who are like part of their parish, or the teens who are part of their parish who they're trying to educate. So I think they should take responsibility for that.
Yeah, no, I think, very well said. I really like that. It was a very good discussion on it. It's an issue I've thought about for like ever since the whole like youth ministry stuff went down. Like I've been thinking about it. It's been in the back of my head, not the front of my head, but it's something that I've thought of every time I come back home and I see like my old parish, you know.
Yeah.
All right, so that concludes that section, and let's move on to the last one, the third section of it. This is suggestions. Anything you guys have to offer from your own minds and hearts to help the church improve in this important sector of faith life?
In catechesis?
Yeah. So, first off, just simple. What does the church need to do better in this instance?
I think they need to teach what the church teaches more than
Okay.
what you feel. That's what I gathered a lot from my experience in the church. A lot of it is sugar coated, so they don't like hurt people's feelings. And it's more just like, what does this mean to you? Which is an important part of it, but it's not the primary thing at all. So I think they need to be a little more harsh and direct, and say exactly what the church teaches and why it teaches them, which is why it's important. And then I think automatically it will be what the individual comes to want and feel is right.
Yeah, well said. How about you, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think one weakness of like young adult ministry, teen ministry, youth ministry, I guess, today is that often it can be sugar coated. There's a lot of like, it's very emotional, and teens are almost encouraged to try to get this like emotional high from like prayer or worship or something, and it's not it doesn't stem from a deep relationship with God as much as it does, it's like an experience, and it's a gift from God that like we can have these encounters with God, and really like it can be helpful for some people to really feel like there is someone there that they're speaking to, and like they feel that presence, and that's really important. But it's problematic when programs focus on that too much and don't put the responsibility on the individuals to make it, to pray, to really like cultivate like a relationship with God in which they can like listen and talk to him. And then also, like Colette was saying, to have that greater understanding of like all of the church teachings, and not just like, oh, you shouldn't lie and cheat and steal and kill people, but also like this is how you can become a saint, like this is how you should like grow in your love of God and others, and like grow in your faith and like grow in hope. And I think all of that could be done better. So I don't know how, but
I'm glad you got the basics out of the way, Alex. There, I think you hit on each one. All right. So maybe I don't expect you guys to have anything comprehensive, but you'll get to sit in the chair of St. Peter for a day. You get to be Pope for a day. What changes are you doing to improve Catholic catechesis? And this can range from anything. You can say like, oh, I'm calling a council to talk to the bishops and tell them that they need to put this emphasis on there, or I'm releasing an encyclical to know that the church like takes this like issue seriously. Anything at all. You're the Pope. Well, I don't know whether this is right or wrong to do, but I'm doing it anyway.
I guess I would call a council and say that priests need to be more direct, generally, and I guess show them how they should be direct and why they should be direct. And I don't know, I guess pay attention to focusing on the different age groups, because the parishioners are all different ages, and I don't know. Actually, I think they do a pretty good job of that usually, but being more direct, I think. Yeah.
All right, Alex, what about you?
I guess maybe to write an encyclical and just, I guess a lot of people probably don't read encyclicals, so I don't know how how helpful that is. But I think reading Pope John Paul II's encyclicals, where he really like calls out to the youth and tells people how important it is that they be part of the church, and just like membership within the church, like not just, it's different from other churches, it's different from say like some Protestant denomination, because it's not It's not just sort of like a formality, but it is really important to be a member of the church and be a member of that like international community. I mean, like this morning, Pope Francis called everyone to say an Our Father at
Right,
noon
right.
Rome time
Rome time, yeah.
for the virus. And I think
Yeah.
that like the fact that we as a church have that sort of unity, that we all do these things together, and people, I mean, like I woke up at 4 a.m. to do it. I know that people like all over the country were up at all different times of the day, and breaking up their schedule to be part of something bigger. And I think that really reaching out to individuals and telling them that's important that they be part of the church, and why it's different from other churches, that it's not just sort of like, oh, you can come and like go to church because it'll be helpful for you, but to show how important it is that people like be within like this community of this universal church that we're in. So
Right. Yeah, very well said. The unity of the church, I think, across all of these continents, like you mentioned, is a big deal in all of this. But do you think that actually makes it more difficult to actually do like the change? I guess in a sense, do you think that it's easier to go from the top down, from the Pope to the cardinal to the bishops to the priests, or do you think it's more like more grassroots, that it has to start in each individual parish, and they have to do their own part, and that as a whole, sooner or later, if each parish does their own thing, we'll have like the church improving, I guess, in a sense.
yeah, I guess then an encyclical would more serve as like a call to the youth ministers in the individual parishes to do that on their own, because it does feel sort of impersonal, even if it is like the Pope can only be so personal, and so it is
Right.
important that members within the church community take responsibility for that and really reach out to their fellow, their neighbors and people in their community. Yeah.
Yeah, well said, well said. All right, last question for you guys. How do we get more people to be catechists? Quite simple, really. It's the simple questions are the hardest ones to answer, though.
Do you mean like professional catechists, like teaching at churches, or just like every person?
I don't think professional in the sense that you go get a degree in a theology and then go
Well,
teach at a parish, something like that. I think, how do we get more catechists in our parishes, basically? How do we get more people to do this work?
maybe pay them a little bit more, not like
Most of
bribery,
them are
but like
volunteers.
That's a good
exactly,
point,
but like
actually. Yeah, that's a really good point.
people do have needs and they only have so much time on their hands. So if that's like an actual job, then I don't know.
I wonder if
You think
paying
more people
them,
would do this
though,
kind of job?
would bring in people who weren't there for the right reason.
Yeah, that's
That is a problem that could be taken into account. Although
if it's paid just like a little bit though,
yeah.
like a lower salary where it's like doable to still raise a family, but like not, I don't know.
I think
I
for
don't know,
most people that are involved, it's probably not their. I mean, at least at my parish, they all had like main jobs that they did during the week.
Well, yeah, but that also means that they don't have as much time to like do it because they're working and they have a personal life.
Yeah, but they wouldn't. It's not full time for most people. Like, there's a head youth minister maybe who does it all the time, but like youth groups, I think most life team groups probably meet only a couple times a week, and it's usually at night. So the youth
Yeah.
ministers don't really need to be like working full time, and I don't think a lot of parishes can really afford to pay that.
Yeah.
They just have to be
Definitely
like they're
not,
just
yeah.
sort of there part time, and they have to. I mean, they have something else that they do like during the day when students aren't there, like during the week if it's a weekend thing.
Right. I don't think the volunteer is going away anytime soon. At least not until the church becomes like even more rich than she already is able to pay everybody for everything that they do in a parish.
Yeah.
I think that's what we depend on as a church is those people, like you said, Alex, that have the energy to come in and to do this work that is hard. Honestly, it's very hard. It's very rewarding in a personal sense, but it's not a walk in the park either. Um,
I think
but yeah,
that
no,
something that could be helpful is just to emphasize that it is our, like, we are called to evangelize. I think a lot of people don't really
mhm,
see it. Like, they're like, oh, well, I mean, I do this. I have my job and I have my commitments. And then some people are supposed to evangelize and reach out to people and bring them into the church, but that's not really my thing.
no, yeah,
And just for the church as a whole, I mean, churches individually, I guess, to teach their parishioners that it's really important that we all try to evangelize and try to bring other people in and like teach them what we do know. Because if we really think that knowing and loving God is the best thing, and that's why we're here, you know, like to cultivate that and grow in that, then we should want that for other people. And if we find this joy and
absolutely,
this peace in having this relationship with
absolutely.
God, then if we really love our neighbor, like we should want that for them. And so I
Hmm.
think just like teaching people within the church, like, okay, well, if you really love God and you really think that's so great and like you really want to go to heaven and you think that this is like the ultimate end of like human life, then shouldn't
Hmm.
you want that for like your neighbor, like this other person in your community? And to just like
Yeah.
teach people that it's important that we all take responsibility for the church as a whole, and like that we all go out and
Hmm.
reach out to people. It's not just like you and God, but that there's a whole world out there of people who are missing out on this thing that is so important for you, and you should like want to share that. So
Yeah. I I I, I absolutely 100% agree with that. Uh, I think the problem though becomes that people don't want to take on that responsibility. Maybe that's a judgment of the culture or the society that we live in, that we're raised in a way that we're like, well, I don't want to do anything more than I have to do, um, for something. Like I'd go to church every Sunday. I'd do my part. Like why should I have to do more? And I think it's getting people not to look at it as this. I'm doing more, like I'm putting more of a burden on myself than I'm giving something more to others, right?
yeah.
Um, which, like you said, if we think this is really the best thing, if we think this is the truth, then we should be very, very willing to go out of our way to give that to other people instead of seeing it as a burden on our own livelihoods to do so. Um, yeah, very well said.
Yeah, I mean it's hard because
Um,
like we're kind of individualistic and we think about efficiency all the time. Like we want to see the direct like payoff for what we're doing, and so it can
mhm,
be hard to really just like give of our time with no direct payoff. But I think that I mean I don't know personally, but youth ministers that I've spoken to say like how rewarding it is to do that work, and like maybe it doesn't pay off, maybe like they sleep less hours and they get to spend less time with their friends or do like less of their hobbies, but it's really really rewarding, more rewarding than those other things would be, to see like
mhm.
souls being transformed. And yeah, I guess it's only like being in it and seeing those yeah, seeing that like change that can
Hmm.
um, inspire people. But
Yeah. No, very well said, guys. So that'll wrap everything up for this recording session. Thank you guys for jumping in, talking with me. I really appreciate it.
yeah, thank
It's
you
it's
for
also I
inviting
think
us.
it's I think it's a really good way to distract ourselves from the situation that the world has going on right now. Um, but yeah, your opinions were very valuable. Everything y'all said has a place in the minds of people that actually deal with these things. So that's kind of
Yeah.
why I've been trying to do this so that those people hopefully someday are able to hear what we have to say as a faithful, about
Yeah.
the way that we teach our faith. So yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
episode 4 is tomorrow. I have Maureen and Teresa on. So another great dynamic duo, and then fun conversation that we'll have. So we're out here. Hey there, loyal listener. I'm Germ, the host and creator of the Catholit podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Still want more? You can find a whole blog's worth of my thoughts on just about anything faith related at catholit.weebly.com. Thanks for listening, and God bless.